name is Ben Lester, and I own and run Wheatberry Bakery in Amherst, Massachusetts, with my wife and our 2 kids. We really love Amherst and we love being here, and it's been a wild ride but a fun one, and we're still going 7 years later, going strong, and we're looking forward to the next 10 years. So. We were working in fine dining, sort of trying to get in touch with the best quality ingredients and the best preparations, but we were really we weren't satisfied with the sort of separation between the kitchen and the customers, and we felt like it didn't just didn't reach enough of the community for us. So I think it was back there in on a restaurant line, preparing food for people we couldn't see or talk to, that we really made the decision that a cafe, but with the intentions of quality. And we actually, getting into fine dining, we realized we even want to take it another step further. We want to get closer to the food. We want to understand even better what both the environmental impacts are, what the sort of humanity impacts are, and what the impacts are for the consumer. And the more we gardened and talked with farmers and created relationships with people, the more it became clear that our life's work wasn't just about serving really delicious food. I mean, that was definitely a core underpinning, but was also about making sure what we were doing had sort of positive impacts all the way around. We weren't willing to serve really good food if it meant that somewhere in Brazil was going to be polluted, or somewhere in India, people were going to work in terrible working conditions or something. And so I think transparency and accountability became increasingly important to us over the years. And at this point, it's really it's a very core value, and something we work really hard on a day-to-day basis to make sure we're always improving and offering the safest, most humane, and most delicious food we can possibly do. Our mission has become to know your farmer, know your baker. And we really, really believe very strongly in transparent food systems. Transparency creates accountability, and accountability assures that things are having positive impacts on every end. And we can go to pretty much every single farm. I mean, with the exception, we haven't sourced salt locally, and we haven't sourced sugar locally, although we do source them organically and fair trade certified. And someday we would like to go and really look more deeply into some of those systems, and do our own audit and diligence to make sure that they're up to our standards. But in the meantime, we focused on the bulk of what we use, which is vegetables, grains, dairy, meat, cheese, all those things, and source them as locally, organically, and sustainably as we possibly can. And what that means is working with a lot of different producers. We don't call up one distributor each week and get 90% of our stuff in. We work with, we must have at least 24 different vendors at any time. And usually and when I say vendor, that's kind of like an industry standard thing to say, so it's part of my vocabulary, but actually the vendors are the farmers. Jeanette from Chase Hill Farm comes with the Chase Hill cheese every week with a couple big wheels of cheese, and Red Fire Farm shows up every week with organic carrots and onions and produce, and actually several times a week I pick greens and kale and herbs, heirloom tomatoes, squash from our gardens up in Wheatberry, and we actually provide a substantial portion. I'd say we grow about 50% of the produce that we use here currently at our farm in Wheatberry. We run a grain CSA, sort of a community-supported agriculture program that's based around the idea of the production of local staple grains and beans, and it includes dry milling corn, which eventually will usually be cornmeal or masa. And we usually have about 100 to 120 members each year. Originally, the project was created, or we started doing the sort of research and development behind the project in 2008, and then we launched the program in 2009. And the idea was to make some kind of concrete movement to deal with long-term food security in a world where fuel and transportation is becoming increasingly expensive. And again, bringing people closer to their food. So again, we're not just reducing carbon footprint and thinking about future generations. We're also bringing people in more direct contact with their food, with their neighbors, with their community, with the local economy. It keeps dollars in the local economy. We work with about 4 different local farms who grow 10 to 12 different grain crops each year. Usually we have a mix of something like spelt, wheat, oats, barley, rye, milling corn of several different varieties, and usually several different varieties of dry beans. And every year there's one pickup for the members. Actually, you can pick a couple dates, but each member comes once a year. That's the way it's most different from a vegetable share. People think about a vegetable share and they think about going every week to get their fresh produce. Well, with grain it's a little bit different because in the fall every year there's a big harvest. The harvest happens over sort of several months depending on which crops we're talking about. And then the crops all need to be cured and sorted and cleaned, and then it's all ready to be distributed. And in mid-December we hold the distributions for the grain share every year, and hundreds of people load in and grab their bags and their scoops, and we have bins with all the different grains, and you portion up your grains sort of depending on whether or not you have a whole or a half share. The whole shares are sort of geared towards a family of 4 who say is going to cook and bake with their grains 2 or 3 times a week, and half share is geared more towards an avid single or a couple who cooks a lot. Sometimes single people will find another single to join with to split a half or a whole share. But I think often people underestimate how much grains they eat over the course of the year. We're not used to buying for a year, so we're used to buying little bags of things every couple of weeks. But what it basically ends up being is if you can sort of picture a bushel basket, which is about 18 or 20 inches in diameter and about 18 inches tall, after you portion up your share, half share is going to be like a bushel basket filled with 8 to 10 different bags of your grains and beans and corn, and a whole share would be 2 of those bushel baskets. So often people also wonder, how will I store it? I don't have a silo at my house, and I say you don't need a silo, just a regular, your kitchen cupboard will work, or sometimes people will, store sort of some of their share in the cupboard and put some of it in one of their closets or something. And people also worry, because we think also about fresh produce and how spoilable it is. But one of the nice things about the grain share and grains in general, and why they've been such important sustenance for our civilization for 10,000 years, is because they store so well. People also often worry about, but what about moths and stuff? And the other thing I'll tell people, I never heard about a moth in our local grains. It's so fresh that we don't, there isn't time for bugs to grow and develop. That's, when you're buying from the industrial food system and things have been sitting in a warehouse and in a bin, that's when, you end up with problems with bugs. And so actually if that's one thing that, bothers you about using grains, fresh is definitely the way to go. One of the things that we offer in the Grain CSA is a 7 days a week self-service milling station here at the bakery. So whenever we're open, our members can come in here, bring their grain in, and there's a mill and a roller for flaking oats. And we do also offer some of these grains, by the pound for people who want to just dip their toes in and try it out. Although we only end up being able to offer usually a couple of the varieties. So if you want the real full smorgasbord of grain fun, you end up buying a share. But if you want to just kind of test it out, we have grains here by the pound, and both the self-service milling is available for both members and people buying some grain here by the pound. The number one, most important thing to all our members, and the thing that keeps people coming back, is that the flavor is just absolutely outstanding. A fresh ground, good varietal selection, and freshly harvested too. People have just really enjoyed the taste and the flavor and the experience of when you make a pizza, when you grind your own grains into your pizza bowl to mix up your pizza for the night. It's just, you're just so much more connected to your food and your community and the life that's around you, that I think it really makes a big difference for people.